Hey YouTube, what's up? It's me, I'm back. I hope you're well. Hope you're having a powerful one. If not, I hope things get better soon. Um, I hope some of you are getting it now. I, I hope I don't sound like an arrogant twat. I'm trying not to. Um, I'm laying it all down on my channel. Look, I know some of these videos aren't the most well edited and glossy and entertaining, but that's not what really it's about. If I could do that, if I had the skills, I would be, I would be entertaining you. And maybe I am. And there's no point. I say that a lot, don't I? The point. I'm trying to make a point. Um, I am working on some really like snazzy videos, right? It takes a lot of time. And you've got to develop the skills for it, haven't you, as well. Um, and as well, what I want to do on my channel is, even if it might be a bit rough and ready, I want to lay down everything so you get the information, right? Because there's a lot of information to get through. And to get some of the things that I talk about, you need to know the basics. We all, and it's good for me as well. I always go back over the basics. That's my focus in geometry, right? And in symbology. I like to, stick to the simple, most definitive explanation without racing ahead. There's a lot to be gained with the basics of understanding the basics of geometry and the basic shapes and the numbers that correspond to those shapes. And that is really one of the essences of the Renaissance, of the knowledge, the nous, the enlightenment, right? It's always had to try and plant the seeds of truth in ignorant minds, in minds that are blinded to it. And in the Renaissance days, it had to deal with religious fundamentalism, right? The knowledge was and people didn't read, right? There was no need to. There was no books, right? People so but when the books went into print, when that started to happen and that gained momentum and spread throughout society, there was a tidal wave of knowledge and learning, and some of these truths are just basic universal truths in mathematics and in geometry, which leads into all the other arts and sciences. The cosmology in the geometry is in all of the temples. Christian, Hindu, pagan, it doesn't matter, right? In the geometry is about these proportions and relationships, right, between the basic shapes in geometry. Look, it's ancient, it's pagan science, right? So one way to interpretate it is the pagan gods. It was about numbers, right? The numbers represented the pagan gods. There was a central god, and then there were other gods, right, in the pantheon. But the gods represented the numbers. So there's a pagan way of looking at it. In the Christian sense, in the temple, these different parts of the geometry aren't gods, but they're sounds of God. they're emanations, right? And this goes back to that this ties into geometria, where the geometry contained within the temple is about harnessing the different tones in what the shapes in geometry represent.
The names and numbers of God. In the heroic days before settlements and the buildings of temples and cities, the tribes of Israel travelled between the sacred places of their territory, carrying with them the Ark of the Covenant and the materials of its resting place, the tabernacle. At the traditional spots where they pitched camp, they erected the tabernacle, a series of curtain enclosures with the ark lodged in its inner sanctuary, and set up their tents in ritual order around it. The temple at Jerusalem was designed in imitation of the tabernacle. Religion in those days was an entirely practical affair. The wandering tribes depended for their livelihood on communion with the native spirits of their landscape, and the tabernacle was designed, like the temple after it, to attract by similitude the powers of divinity. The names given to the various deities or the various aspects of the vital principle in nature were based on the sounds that were found most effective in evoking their response. From these sounds arose the alphabet. The legendary architect of the tabernacle, Bezalel, was said to have known the combination of letters which heaven and earth were made, and to have fashioned the tabernacle in accordance with them. Each letter corresponded a particular type of universal energy. It corresponded also to the shape, colour, perfume, and other characteristic attributes of the god it symbolized, and most essentially to the god's number. When temples were built as instruments of invocation, they expressed in their dimensions, in their furnishings, and in the areas and shapes of the spaces they enclosed the number of the god to whom they were dedicated. Thus, the temple of Athena, the Virgin, was laid out in units of the Virgin 7. Bezalel and architects in the Masonic tradition followed him were initiated into a science of acoustics, and the ultimate product of his craft, the cosmic temple, was designed to resonate with the music of planetary motion. In its proportions were to be found every type of musical harmony, set out in numerical ratios, and since these numbers corresponded to sounds and letters, the whole structure was an architectural litany containing the names by which all various powers in nature were evoked, and thus forming a pantheon, a complete representation of universal mind.
Right? It's mystical, right? But it's pagan. It was a pagan science, but the Christians adopted it. The Hebrews adopted that same science, right? And the science is encoded into the temple structure, right? So the temple represents the square, which is the earth, and it's a marriage between the square and the circle. And the circle in the temple is represented by the dome in the temple, in the roof structure, right? And in the pagan sense, that was the pantheon of the gods. So there's a Hebrew way of interpreting it, and then there's the pagan way. And there's that's the sacred science of architecture, which is symbolic, and the basic shapes do tie in to this study, right? So like, the numbers are animation basic numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Look at it this way: they're animations. So there's two different ways of looking at it. The Hebrews, um the word Elohim of the Hebrews was one of the names of God, right? So the different names of God in the Hebrew way of looking at these numbers and shapes were the Elohim. They create the different shapes, created different sounds of God. They were emanations of God, which reminds me of that quote, Jesus, I am the Alpha and the Omega, right? So it's a cosmological science related to the Hebrews and to the Greeks and to other cultures that used it, like the Phoenicians or whoever. The marriage and the union between the square, the earth, and the creation, the circle, which is, the heavens. From literature, right, to mathematics, everything. That was the Enlightenment. The printed book, the knowledge, the nous, the Renaissance. It hurled us out of the Dark Ages. Like, one of its biggest oppositions was the patriarchy and the Vatican and the church. But this Enlightenment led to things like the King James Bible going into print, and so there was a renaissance of Christianity. The forces of Christianity went into revolt as well through the Renaissance. Learned men already did. People who had access to libraries, and they knew the knowledge, right? The reason I'm doing this is because, it's a war of ideologies, the right and the left, of politics. The ancient regime has never really wanted the public to have the Enlightenment. That's why they attack it. And that's why they attack liberalism. Is liberalism perfect? No, it's not. But it's the greater good, right? It is. Christian revolution, during the Renaissance, and the Renaissance took hundreds of years to unfold. We're still in the Renaissance, right? The Renaissance has hurtled the world forward in many ways. The geometry contained in the basic shapes of the square, the circle, equilateral triangle, the pentagon, the hexagon, right? Those basic, up to the hexagon, the first six numbers from 1 to 6, they create a cosmology in geometry. And that geometry is using the shapes from nature to create a picture like one you're looking at now that has mathematical relationships. It's a cosmological drawing, right? That's developed, and it is scientific. we're using this. It's based on unified, like the shapes are unified, and they are governed by a proportion that comes from the development from what you're looking at now, from this central dot. That's the universal pole, that central dot. Everything else comes from it, and a natural development into geometry. And so here's another aspect of this symbology of the Vesica Pisces. The first polygon that's produced comes from the proportion contained within the fish shape, the square root 3 proportion. And that's the equilateral triangle. And that symbol of the equilateral triangle is a trinity. You know, that's why it's, you know, this cosmological drawing, its most fundamental part of it, one of the most, you could say, is the equilateral triangle, the trinity. Using basic concepts, no witchy poos, Satan, magic. This is a natural development, and it's to be discovered by anybody, and that's what the Renaissance is about. If civilization were to come to a great end, this same geometry would reappear, because it is a natural thing to develop and study, and the information in it is polymathematical, right? And polymathematical means many things, right? This symbol of nature has contained within it a code, a natural code of number and proportions. All of our arts and crafts come from this. There's a relationship to music. There's a relationship to architecture and measurement, structure and form, out of the very shapes, the basic shapes, from the 2-dimension that then lead into 3-dimensional reality. I don't know what is difficult to understand about this subject. A child can get it, right? And that's where I may sound like an arrogant prick. One of the mottos from the Plato's Academy, Plato's Secret Academy, was, we can't give it away. We can't give it away. And there's some truth in that, because to some people, it goes over their head. They're not interested. There are many mystery schools in secret societies, yada yada yada. I'm not denying it, and none of them exist. Some of them are the good guys, some of them are the bad guys. Not every fraternal group, right, is a satanic right group, like some people like to portray in the truth movement, right? Oh, it's the Freemasons. Oh, it's the Jews. It's the Vatican. It's the Jesuits. You know, all these rumors of secretive groups that run the planet, and all of those myths and conspiracy stories. Look, if you want to believe that there's a very, very small group controlling the planet, I'm not telling you not to, but you're wasting your time, probably. Have you ever wondered what you would be doing just before World War II? You're probably doing it now, right? This is just off the cuff video. I don't even intend to make a point. I don't know what my point is. I'm trying to lay down the basics. I'm not an expert. That's why I'm going through the basic numbers 1 to 12. That system of 1 to 12. And it's not just about 1 to 12. Numbers continue after 12. There's number 13. We haven't dealt with the number 13 yet. But that'll be down the line, further down the line. Have I mentioned number 13 yet? Jesus had 12 disciples, didn't he? Have you ever wondered why all of the religious icons in different religions had 12? There were 12. Always 12. Why 12? Buddha, 12 followers. Muhammad, 12 followers. Jesus, 12. King Arthur and the Round Table, 12. It's a common number that pops up in cosmologies, right? What does cosmologies mean, Simon? It means a cosmology is a way of explaining the universe, right? Science is a cosmology. Religions are cosmologies. There was a cosmology done thousands of years ago, and the proportions and relationships of shapes, like the basic shapes, were worked out, right? When we discovered the geometry, or rediscovered it, yeah, we developed a system that has led, fast forward now to our sciences, right? I digress slightly here. Even language comes from geometry, right? The tones, the sounds we make in our language, right, that make the letters, when that was developed, that's when these systems of languages were developing. The letters had correspondences to numbers, and the sounds, right? That's where we get our alphabet from. Gematria. The Phoenicians used a very neat 22-letter consonant alphabet to encode the sounds of their tongue. In time, this script was adopted by most Mediterranean peoples, and through its Latin variation came to be the alphabet that we have today, right? Gematria uses letters as number symbols, so language becomes mathematics. Important canonical, geometrical, music, meteorological, and cosmological numbers are defined by many key terms in ancient texts, first appearing widely in ancient Greece. Gematria was subsequently adopted to Hebrew and also to Arabic, where it is also known as abjad. A simplified system also exists in all three languages using the same values without the zeros. The example you can see shows two related phrases connected through an identical sum. So the Phoenicians didn't use the decimal system. They had 22 letters in their alphabet, and they also used the 22 to 7 ratio as pi. Right. This is a squared circle using a Vesica Pisces. Now, I'm not going to waste time telling you how to do it, but it's a worthwhile exercise to do. But it's not maybe necessary that you need to get a compass in a pen or a pencil. But I do encourage you to start. a basic construct of the Vesica Pisces is around a circle. If you then inscribe two Vesica Pisces around a circle, that gives you the proportions between the inner circle and the outer circle. And then if you incorporate a square around that circle, it gives you a third circle. And a curiosity in mathematics and geometry is that those areas of those circles have correspondences with their, the size of the area and mathematical relationships, right? The three circles. It's a natural cosmology, easily developed from a Vesica Pisces. Right, I'm digressing here. Right, let's focus. Right, so the squared circle with a Vesica Pisces. Let me explain something about that. Right, there's a square here, and the relation, and so the square and the circle, the square and the circle central to this diagram have the same perimeter, right? And a square around a circle defines a heavenly ring whose area is equal to the enclosed circle. The solstices and the equinoxes quarter the year. So that squared, the squared circle. There are different ways to square the circle. This is the basic way to inscribe and then square the circle that has an equal perimeter between the relationship of the square and the circle. There are different squared circles, right? But this particular squared circle, the relationship is that the perimeter of the square, which is rational, it's 4 times the length of the width, is the same as the perimeter or circumference of the circle. So it's naturally harmonized, right? Then here's the thing, with a circle, you're using pi. There's a bit of a disconnect here for people with pi. The ancients didn't have the modern equation for pi. The ancients' most precise equation for pi was 7 to 22, right? The ratio of 7 to 22. There were different ones used, but the best one and the most accurate one, right, that the ancients knew was used for thousands of years, and there's proof in that in the temple building that they did, right? It's been proven by surveying and surveyors and archaeologists. The most accurate one and common one the ancients used, ratio proportion for pi, was the ratio of 7 to 22. Now that explains, right, 7 to 22 ratio of pi means that if the width of a circle, the diameter of a circle is 7, right, and you use the relationship, the pi relationship 7 to 22, the perimeter is 22, right? That's what the ancients used. The ratio, there are other regular ratios they use. We now have a modern interpretation of pi, right? 3.14, whatever it is, and it goes on for infinity. The reason that number, in the decimal system that we use, pi goes on forever, it's an irrational number. We use a decimal system, 1 to 10. But the ancients weren't using that system with their 7 to 22 ratio, right? They didn't use the decimal system like we use it today. I digress. And that's the disconnect. Because we're not talking about a decimal system. We're talking about a duodecimal system, 1 to 12. So they did know, however, though, that there was a harmonious relationship between this square and the circle, which was developed naturally and develops naturally from a Vesica Pisces, the fish-like type lens of mathematics that has polymathematical information in it, right? It's not a portal to it's not a satanic portal. It might be a portal. If you want to call it a portal, call it a portal. The reason I'm getting frustrated is because there's so many ignorant people out there, right? Like people that follow David Bass and Round Saturn's Eye. Oh, it's satanic portal. It's the eye of Lucifer. It's Satan's eye. One of the reasons the eye symbol is such an important symbol in the mystery schools and in geometry, and why it's used as a symbol for God, is because of its mathematical relationships, right, that's contained within the Vesica Pisces. It's polymathematical. We won't go into the equilateral triangle just yet, right? I've done that. That's my favourite shape if you haven't got that. The equilateral triangle. Just watch out for the red ones. I'm joking. I've digressed again. Where were we? Squared circle. Oh, this is hard work. Do you get it? I mean, visuals help, don't they, guys, right? You can see plainly here on the plane, right, a squared circle, which is naturally formed by a Vesica Pisces, right? That square and the diagonal line in that square is the square root 2 ratio, yeah? The Vesica Pisces, we know, is an expression of the square root 3 ratio, right? You should know that by now, right? For anyone that doesn't, you're going to have to go and watch my previous videos. And whilst I'm on this part of the subject, look, I don't want to blow my own trumpet. If you've got the time, over the last 2 months, it's not very long, I've compiled some videos for the last 2 months. There's a couple of older videos in my whole channel. One's called New Jerusalem Ideal City. I urge you to watch all of my videos about geometry. It might take you a week or two. Depends how busy you are. You could do it all probably in a couple of days, right? I've got about 7 or 8 hours of material. I know that's a long time. But if you can put up with my annoying voice and my harsh Somerset manly tones, rough round the edges, with a few mistakes, right? I've laid it all out for you guys, all of the information. And I'm not saying I've put out all the information. I've put down enough information now for you to, of all the keywords, all of the key meanings. I haven't gatekeeped anything. I'm giving you the rundown on the gnosis, on the knowledge, right? Some of it might sound a bit mystical to do when I'm talking about architecture, but it's not. If you've got to where we are now, if you're listening to me now, some of the videos that I've done can bring you up to speed, right? Or give you enough information for you to go off and do your own research, right? And back up what I've said. I may have made the odd mistake, but most of 99.9% of everything I've told you to do with geometry is true, right? And the study from the ancient temples is key, right? In my videos about the New Jerusalem, the knowledge contained by the temple builders, the Temple of Solomon, the tabernacle, the philosophies of it, right? It's there for anyone to find. I'm not giving you anything special. All I'm doing is pointing something out to you. Stuff's been pointed out to me. Luckily enough, I met some brilliant people who were involved. They're scholars in this subject, worldwide renowned scholars. And I just was lucky enough to meet them, right? So I'm pointing it out to you now, right? So these are all, there's a reason number 4 is associated with the square, and this is why I'm going over the basics. Number 3 is obviously related to a triangle, obviously, right? This is basic principles of geometry that children should be taught from a young age, and taught well to children. It's an amazing thing, right? But trying to point it out to an adult with a closed mind sometimes feels like banging your head on a brick wall, especially if that person's been, gaslit on YouTube about satanic symbolism. It's a difficult thing, right? We can all be turned off maths when we're kids for various reasons, and I'm not going to do a major speech about that. Number 4, and it's the structure of number 4 in the square, obviously is a relationship to the cube, isn't there, right? The square is the two-dimensional representation of a cube, but also it's got a relationship to the tetrad, right? Tetrad means 4, yeah. So you might not know that one. Tetrad means 4. So tetrahedral. Is there a tetrahedral here? I'll pop one up. A tetrahedral has a relationship to number 4, right? So a tetrahedral is a 3-dimensional shape, and in the geometry of the 3 dimensions of a tetrahedral, those mathematical principles that are to be discovered from the information contained in the 2-dimensional. So back to this squared circle. Well, the geometry of the Great Pyramid at Giza is a squared circle. There are many great temples that are squared circles. Many Hindu temples were squared circles. Stonehenge is another squared circle. But the Christians used square circle as well, right? And then there's the polymathematical geometrical relationships, right? Here we have the relationships of a square and a circle, right? And then there are proportions, mathematical proportions to do with the areas, the size of them, right? As well. And it naturally divides a circle into 4, doesn't it? There's astronomy, right? And there's a cardinal points, right? So, and then here we have the relationship between a circle, a square, and a triangle, the first basic shapes and ratios in geometry, which would be the circle and pi. Then we have a triangle, so the relationship that's specific to a triangle, equilateral triangle, is a square root 3 ratio, right? And then you've got your square in this. So the relationship is the square root 2 relationship. Those 3 mathematical relationships of pi, square root 2, square root 3 give you these shapes, which is the basis in basic formation of the beginning of a cosmological drawing, or a geometrical drawing that contains shapes with the same, that are governed by the same proportions, but they have mathematical relationships and harmonious relationships with each other. So there's mathematical and geometrical information there. This is the polymathematical information to be learned with the number 4. So I've give you a bit of a rundown there on the polymathematical information. There's lots more polymathematical information to learn, and that's the wonders and beauty of geometry, which is enlightening, right? Anyone that's telling you, oh, it's occultic, oh, it's the devil, it's not in the Bible. The thing is, though, just that's what you're up against. We're up against ignorance, unfortunately, and fundamentalism. What forces in this world don't want the enlightenment to spread throughout the whole of humanity, right? You know, doesn't that make you wonder what side is right? Is it fundamentalist Christianity going, no, this is of the devil, it's occultic, Satanists use it? Or is it, are they right? Has God done some twisted trick where he mixed in the basic geometry, and really that's the tools of the devil? Doesn't the devil tell you, if you're a Christian, that the devil's just a copycat, right? And he's just an impersonator and a deceiver? He might use these symbols, but they're not his, are they? No, they're not. They're of whatever your God is, whether it's Allah, Great Spirit, the great geometer in the sky, the great architect, Jesus, Buddha, whatever it is. The Creator left his mark in the universe for all to discover, in nature, in the creation. If that's what you're inclined to believe, you don't have to believe in a God. You can believe in the force. What is the force that binds the creation together? Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Have a powerful day.